Have you ever felt invisible? Like no matter how hard you try, the world just looks right through you? Tonight, I'm going to share a story about a man who walked into a restaurant with $50 in his pocket and a heart full of hope, only to have that hope shattered in the cruelest way possible. But what happened next? What happened when a stranger sitting just a few tables away decided to do something extraordinary? This isn't just a story about money or romance. It's a story about dignity, about being seen, about how one simple act of kindness can change the trajectory of an entire life. So if you've ever felt like giving up, if you've ever wondered whether showing up even matters, this story is for you. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll understand why sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply believe we deserve a seat at the table. Before we begin, if stories about hope, redemption, and second chances speak to your soul, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is built on your support, and every subscription helps me bring more of these heartfelt stories to you. Now, let me take you to a cold November evening in Boston, where our story begins. Daniel Carter stood in front of the bathroom mirror of his small apartment, trying to smooth out the wrinkles in his dress shirt. The fabric had softened from years of washing, and no matter how carefully he'd ironed it, a stubborn crease refused to disappear from the left sleeve. He ran his hand over it one more time, then let out a quiet sigh. "It'll have to do," he whispered to his reflection. In the living room, his 6-year-old daughter Emma sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, her pigtails slightly uneven from Daniel's attempt at styling that morning. She was coloring intently in her favorite book, her tongue sticking out the side of her mouth in concentration. "Daddy, you look fancy," she said without looking up, her crayon moving in deliberate strokes across the page. Daniel smiled, though his stomach was twisted in knots. "You think so, sweetheart?" "Uh-huh, like when we went to Aunt Michelle's wedding." Emma finally looked up, her brown eyes studying him seriously. "Are you going on a date?" The word felt foreign in Daniel's mouth. A date. When was the last time he'd even thought of himself as someone who went on dates? After his wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, dating had seemed impossible, unnecessary, almost disrespectful to her memory. But lately, the loneliness had become a physical weight. It wasn't just about wanting a partner. It was about the endless nights of silence after Emma went to bed. The way he sometimes caught himself setting 2 plates at dinner before remembering. The hollow ache of having no one to share the small victories with, like when Emma learned to tie her shoes, or when he finally fixed the leaky faucet he'd been putting off for months. "Yeah, baby. I'm going on a date," he said softly. Emma grinned. "Is she pretty?" "I don't know. I've never met her." "Then how do you know you like her?" Daniel crouched down beside his daughter, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "That's what dates are for, Em. To see if we like each other." "Oh." She thought about this for a moment. "Daddy, you should smile more. You have a nice smile. Daddy smile. As completed, and Daddy smile. Daddy smile. And Daddy smile." His throat tightened. "Kids had a way of seeing right through you." "I'll try, sweetheart." Mrs. Patterson from downstairs had agreed to watch Emma for the evening. She was a retired school teacher with a soft spot for Daniel and his daughter, often bringing them casserole dishes covered in aluminum foil with handwritten notes. "Thought you could use a home-cooked meal." When she arrived, Emma ran to hug her, and Daniel took the opportunity to slip into the kitchen. He opened the drawer where he kept the emergency envelope, a thin collection of bills he'd been saving for car repairs or Emma's school supplies. He counted out $50. It felt like both too much and not enough. The restaurant he'd chosen, Marcello's, wasn't expensive by most standards. But for Daniel, who clipped coupons and bought generic brands, it represented a gamble. He'd looked at the menu online, calculating in his head. An appetizer to share, 2 entrees, maybe a dessert if things went well. $50 could cover it if he was careful. He folded the bills and slid them into his wallet, then tucked a spare $5 into his front pocket just in case. "You got this," he told himself, though his hands were shaking slightly. The November air bit at his face as he walked to the bus stop. He couldn't afford an Uber, and his car had been acting up lately, another expense he was avoiding. The bus ride took 20 minutes, and with every stop, Daniel's mind raced. What if she didn't like him? What if he said something stupid? What if she took one look at him and realized he wasn't worth her time? He tried to push the thoughts away, focusing instead on the messages they'd exchanged over the past 2 weeks. Her name was Jessica. She worked in marketing, loved hiking, and had a dog named Biscuit. She'd seemed kind in her messages. Normal. Real. When he'd told her he was a single dad, she'd responded with a heart emoji. "That's really admirable. Your daughter is lucky to have you." That message had given him the courage to suggest meeting in person. The restaurant came into view as the bus rounded the corner, a modest but elegant building with warm light spilling through its windows. Through the glass, Daniel could see couples seated at candlelit tables, their faces animated with conversation and laughter. He felt both drawn to it and terrified of it. The hostess greeted him with a professional smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" Yes. Carter. Table for 2. She scanned her list, then nodded. Right this way. The table was by the window, exactly as he'd requested. He'd thought it would be nice, a view of the street, the city lights twinkling against the dark November sky. Now, sitting there alone, he felt exposed, like everyone walking by could see him waiting, hoping. He ordered water to start and checked his phone. 6:47 p.m. Their reservation was for 7. He was early, which was good. It showed he cared. The minutes crawled by. He watched the door, his heart jumping every time it opened. A couple walked in, laughing about something. An older man with a briefcase. A group of women celebrating a birthday. But no Jessica. By 7:15 p.m., Daniel's water glass was empty, and the waitress had stopped by twice to ask if he wanted to order. "Still waiting," he said, forcing a smile. She should be here any minute. But the words felt hollow. He sent a text. "Hey, I'm here at the table by the window. Take your time." He added a smiley face, then immediately regretted it. Did that seem desperate? At 7:30 p.m., another message. "Everything okay? Just checking in." No response. The restaurant hummed with life around him. Conversations rose and fell like music. Forks clinked against plates. Someone laughed so hard they snorted, and their table erupted in good-natured teasing. Daniel sat in the center of it all, utterly alone. By 7:45 p.m., the truth was settling into his chest like a stone. She wasn't coming. He should leave. He knew he should leave. But something kept him in that chair, some stubborn, desperate part of him that whispered, just a little longer. Maybe she's stuck in traffic. Maybe her phone died. Then his phone buzzed. Relief flooded through him so fast it made him dizzy. He grabbed the phone, his hands trembling as he unlocked the screen. But the message that appeared wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. "Wow, you actually went? I was just messing with you. Sorry, but you're not really my type. Not worth the Uber. TBH. Daniel stared at the words, reading them twice to make sure he understood correctly. A second message appeared. You seem nice. But seriously, you thought I was actually coming? The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. Around him, the restaurant continued its symphony of normalcy, but Daniel heard none of it. All he could hear was the roaring in his ears, the sound of humiliation flooding every corner of his mind. She had never intended to meet him. This had all been a joke, a game. He'd taken $50 from his emergency fund, left his daughter with a neighbor, ironed his old shirt until his arm ached, and ridden a bus across town for a punchline. His eyes burned, and he blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people. He reached for his wallet under the table, his fingers fumbling with the leather. Inside, the $50 sat there, useless now. He had a spare $5 in his front pocket. That was it. $55 total. Not enough to order anything without looking pathetic. Not enough to justify staying. But leaving meant walking out of this beautiful restaurant, past the hostess, past the couples enjoying their evenings, wearing the shame of being stood up like a scarlet letter. Daniel's jaw clenched. Pull yourself together, he thought. Emma needs you to pull yourself together. But the truth was harder than that. The truth was that for a few brief weeks, he'd allowed himself to hope. He'd let himself imagine what it might feel like to share his life with someone again, to laugh over dinner, to have someone ask how his day went and actually care about the answer. And now that hope lay shattered on the table in front of him, as broken as the water droplets sliding down his empty glass. He glanced around the restaurant, wondering if anyone had noticed, wondering if they could see the humiliation written across his face. That's when he saw her, a woman sitting alone at a corner table, her posture elegant and composed. She wasn't looking at him directly, but something in the angle of her gaze suggested she'd been watching. Her expression wasn't one of pity, exactly. It was something else, something Daniel couldn't quite name. He looked away quickly. Shame, burning hotter now. Even a stranger could see his failure. Victoria Sterling had come to Marcello's that evening with no particular agenda. After 12 hours of meetings, investor calls, and crisis management at Sterling Organics, she'd needed a space that wasn't her office or her empty penthouse apartment. This restaurant had become her refuge over the past year, a place where she could sit with a glass of wine and her laptop, answering emails in peace, while the soft ambiance reminded her that life existed beyond quarterly earnings reports. She'd built her company from the ground up, turning a small organic baby food startup into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Forbes had called her the woman redefining infant nutrition. Fast Company had featured her in their 40 under 40 list. But success, she'd learned, could be its own kind of loneliness. Tonight, she'd planned to review the packaging designs for their new product line. Instead, she found herself watching the man by the window. At first, it was just a glance, the kind of idle observation that happens in public spaces. He was well-dressed, though his clothes had that worn-in quality that spoke of care rather than wealth. His posture was hopeful, almost painfully so, as he kept checking his phone and glancing at the door. Victoria recognized that posture. She'd worn it herself once, years ago, when she'd waited for her ex-fiancé at a restaurant, not unlike this one, waited for him to show up and tell her he was ready to choose her over his career, over his fears, over everything that had kept them apart. He never showed. So yes, Victoria knew what it looked like when hope began to curdle into realization. She watched as the man's shoulders tensed each time the door opened. Watched as he sent messages on his phone, his thumbs moving with increasing urgency. Watched as the minutes stretched and his water glass emptied and the waitress began to avoid his table. And then she saw the moment it happened. The moment his phone lit up and he grabbed it with desperate speed. The moment he read whatever was on the screen. The moment his entire body went rigid, as though someone had struck him. Victoria's chest tightened. She couldn't see his phone, but she didn't need to. The devastation on his face told her everything. He'd been stood up, no worse than that. From the way he kept staring at the screen, rereading it, she suspected the message had been deliberately cruel. The man set his phone down slowly, like it had burned him. Then he did something that broke Victoria's heart. He sat up straighter. He composed his face into a careful mask of neutrality. He looked around the restaurant to see if anyone had noticed his humiliation, and when his eyes briefly landed on her table, Victoria saw something in them that she recognized all too well. The desperate need to be invisible, combined with the soul-deep loneliness of being utterly alone in a crowded room. She looked away, giving him that dignity. But she couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, his hands clasped on the table, his jaw clenched against what she suspected were tears. What kind of person does that? She thought. What kind of person leads someone on, lets them show up, and then mocks them for having hope? The waitress approached his table again, her professional smile tinged with sympathy. Victoria couldn't hear the exchange, but she saw the man shake his head politely, saw him pull out his wallet and open it under the table as though checking something. Then she saw him close it again, his face tightening. Victoria had built her career on reading people, on understanding unspoken cues, and in that moment, she understood exactly what had just happened. He couldn't afford to order anything. He'd come here with just enough money for a date that would never happen, and now he was trapped, too proud to leave immediately, too broke to justify staying. The injustice of it lit something fierce inside her. This man had shown up. He'd taken a risk. He'd been brave enough to hope for something better. And his reward had been public humiliation and an empty table. No, Victoria thought. That's not how this ends. She raised her hand, catching the attention of her usual waiter, Marcus. He approached with his characteristic warmth. "Miss Sterling, can I get you anything else?" "Actually, Marcus, I need a favor." She kept her voice low, glancing toward the man by the window. "Do you see that gentleman over there? The one at table 7? Marcus followed her gaze and nodded. "I want you to bring him a plate of your linguine with the garlic butter sauce. Add the house salad and a glass of the sparkling lemonade." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Should I tell him it's from you?" "No." Victoria pulled out her credit card and handed it to him. "Charge it to my account now. When you bring it out, tell him it's been taken care of. If he asks who sent it, just say a friend. Nothing more." "Of course." Marcus pocketed the card with a knowing smile. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness, Marcus. It's just right." As the waiter walked away, Victoria turned back to her laptop, though she couldn't focus on the screen in front of her. Her heart was beating too fast, her mind already racing ahead to what would happen next. Would he accept it? Would he be offended? Would he think it was another joke? Another cruelty? She glanced up as Marcus approached table 7 with a steaming plate of pasta and a tall glass of lemonade. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched the man's reaction. Confusion first. He shook his head, gesturing that there must be a mistake. Marcus said something, his expression gentle, and reassuring. The man looked around the restaurant, bewildered, his eyes searching for whoever had sent the meal. For a moment, Victoria thought about looking away, about letting the gesture remain anonymous. But then she thought, no, he needs to know he's been seen. He needs to know someone noticed, and someone cared. So when his gaze swept across the room and landed on her table, she didn't look away, she met his eyes. And then she stood. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt invisible or wondered whether showing up matters, please take a moment to hit that like button and drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Are you in New York? Tokyo? A small town in the Midwest? I love knowing this community spans the globe. Your engagement means everything. Victoria made her way across the restaurant with the confidence of someone who had long ago stopped apologizing for taking up space. But beneath that confidence, her heart was hammering. Daniel watched her approach, his expression a mixture of confusion and wariness. He looked like a man bracing for another blow. She stopped beside his table, noting the way his hands gripped the edge as though preparing to flee. "I hope you don't mind," Victoria said, her voice gentle but clear. "I took the liberty of ordering you dinner. I didn't," he stammered. "I can't accept this. I don't even know you." "You don't have to know me." Victoria gestured to the empty chair across from him. "May I sit?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly, as if unsure what else to do. Victoria sat, folding her hands on the table. Up close, she could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the careful way he held himself, the quality of his shirt that spoke of someone who took care with what little he had. "I'm Victoria," she said simply. "Daniel." His voice was rough, uncertain. "Daniel." She nodded. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear it, okay?" He didn't respond, just watched her with those guarded eyes. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "This isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is me telling you that what just happened to you was cruel, and you didn't deserve it. You showed up tonight. You took a risk. You were brave, and I watched someone punish you for that bravery." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You saw? Not the messages, but I saw enough." She kept her voice steady. "And I want you to know something. You deserve to eat. You deserve to sit in this restaurant and enjoy a meal. You deserve to be treated with dignity, even if the world tries to tell you otherwise." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. Then his eyes filled with tears he couldn't quite hide. "No one's ever," he stopped, swallowing hard. "No one's ever said anything like that to me." Victoria felt her own throat tighten. Then, "It was long overdue." The words hung between them, creating a space that felt sacred somehow, as if the noise of the restaurant had faded, leaving just the two of them in this small bubble of unexpected grace. Daniel looked down at the plate of pasta in front of him. Steam still rose from it, carrying the scent of garlic and butter and herbs. His stomach growled audibly, betraying him. "I haven't eaten since breakfast," he admitted quietly. "Then please," Victoria said. He picked up the fork, his hand trembling slightly. The first bite seemed to take all his courage, as though accepting the food meant accepting her words, accepting that maybe he did deserve this small kindness. As he ate, Victoria found herself telling him about the restaurant, about how she came here to escape the chaos of running a company. She kept her tone light, asking nothing of him, offering only presence. And slowly, gradually, Daniel began to relax. He told her about his daughter Emma, and the way his whole face changed when he spoke, her name told Victoria everything she needed to know about what mattered most to him. He told her about his job as a night shift warehouse supervisor, about how he'd been trying to get certified as a medical technician but couldn't afford the training program. He told her about his late wife, Sarah, and how even 3 years later, he sometimes forgot she was gone. "She used to say I was too serious," Daniel said, a sad smile crossing his face. "She'd tell me I needed to smile more. My daughter says the same thing now." "Maybe they're right," Victoria said gently. "But maybe smiling is harder when you're carrying the weight of the world alone." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, as though trying to understand why this stranger was being kind to him. "Why did you do this?" he asked finally. Victoria considered the question. She could have given him a surface answer, something about paying it forward or believing in kindness. But this moment felt too important for platitudes. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible," she said. "I know what it's like to show up and be told you're not enough. And I know what it's like to wonder if anyone even notices you're there." She paused. "Someone noticed you tonight, Daniel. I noticed. And I'm telling you, you're worth noticing." His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered. They sat together until his plate was empty, until the lemonade was gone, until the weight in his chest seemed a little lighter. When it was time for him to go, Victoria pulled a business card from her bag and set it on the table. "I come here every Thursday," she said, "usually around 6. If you ever want to share a table again, no pressure, no expectations. You know where to find me." Daniel picked up the card, his fingers brushing over the embossed letters. Victoria Sterling, CEO, Sterling Organics. His eyes widened. You're the CEO of Sterling Organics?" She smiled. "Does that change anything?" No. He shook his head in disbelief. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Victoria said, standing. "That's why it matters." As she walked back to her table, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not hope for herself, but hope for the possibility that small acts of seeing each other, of choosing kindness over indifference, could actually change something. She glanced back once to see Daniel still sitting there, the card in his hand. His expression transformed from devastation to something new, something that looked almost like belief. The following Thursday, Daniel found himself standing outside Marcello's at 5:55 p.m., his heart pounding in his chest. He'd spent the entire week debating whether to come. Part of him insisted it had been a one-time gesture, that Victoria Sterling, a CEO, for God's sake had simply felt sorry for him and would have long forgotten their encounter by now. But another part of him, the part that Emma had watered with her constant insistence that, "Daddy, you need to smile more," whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had meant what she said. He'd stopped at the library after his shift to use the computer, Googling Sterling Organics. The articles he found painted Victoria as a brilliant, driven entrepreneur who'd built her company from a small apartment kitchen into a national brand. Photos showed her at conferences, in boardrooms, cutting ribbons at new facility openings. She was impressive in a way that made Daniel feel even smaller. "What am I doing?" he thought, staring at the restaurant door. "She probably won't even be here." But his feet carried him inside anyway. The hostess recognized him and smiled warmly. "Good evening. Are you dining with us tonight?" I'm not sure. I'm looking for someone." She nodded knowingly. "Miss Sterling is at her usual table. Would you like me to?" "No, that's okay. Thank you." His hands were sweating as he walked through the restaurant. And there, in the corner table by the window, sat Victoria with her laptop open and a cup of coffee beside her. She looked up as he approached, and her face broke into a genuine smile. "Daniel," she said, as though his arrival was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm glad you came." "I wasn't sure if you meant it," he admitted. "I always mean what I say." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit." She gestured. "Sit." This time, there was no meal waiting, no grand gesture, just two people sharing space at a table. Victoria closed her laptop and gave him her full attention. "How was your week?" It was such a simple question, but Daniel couldn't remember the last time someone had asked it and actually waited for the answer. So he told her about Emma's school play, where she'd played a tree and had taken the role so seriously that she'd stood perfectly still for the entire performance. He told her about the broken water heater in his apartment and how he'd spent 2 hours on YouTube learning how to fix it because he couldn't afford a plumber. Victoria listened with an intensity that made him feel like his stories mattered. When it was her turn, she told him about the product launch that had gone sideways when the packaging arrived, with a typo that made it look like they were selling orgasmic baby food instead of organic. Daniel laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. "The memes were brutal," Victoria said, grinning. "My marketing team wanted to die. But honestly, the publicity was incredible. Sales went up 30%. So you're saying typos are good for business? Only if you can laugh at yourself." They ordered coffee, just coffee, nothing fancy, and talked until the cafe lights began to dim. They talked about childhood memories, about books they'd loved, about the strange little rituals that got them through hard days. Daniel learned that Victoria had grown up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a school nurse. She'd put herself through business school, working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. "People think success just happens," she said, "like you wake up one day and you're on a Forbes list. But the truth is, it's 1,000 small choices. 1,000 nights of choosing to keep going when quitting would be easier." "Is it worth it?" Daniel asked. "All that sacrifice?" Quote. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Depends on the day you ask me. Some days, yes. Some days I wonder what I gave up to get here." She met his eyes. "What about you?" "What would you do if you could do anything?" "Medical technician," he said immediately. "I've always wanted to work in healthcare, help people, but the certification program costs more than I make in 6 months." "Have you looked into scholarships?" "Yeah, but," he shrugged, "I don't have the time to fill out 1,000,000 applications. And even if I got one, I'd need childcare, transportation, time off work. It just feels impossible." Victoria leaned back, studying him thoughtfully. "What if I told you that impossible is just a word people use when they're too scared to try?" "I'd say you sound like a motivational poster," she laughed. "Fair. But Daniel, I'm serious. What if there was a way? Then I'd probably be too terrified to take it." "Why?" He thought about that. "Because what if I fail? What if I take the risk and it doesn't work out and I've just made everything worse?" Victoria nodded slowly. "I understand that fear. But can I tell you what I've learned?" She leaned forward. "Regret for the things you tried and failed at? That fades. Regret for the things you never tried? That stays with you forever." The words settled between them like seeds. Over the next several weeks, their Thursday meetings became sacred. Daniel started arriving earlier, and Victoria started closing her laptop sooner. They moved from coffee to sharing appetizers to eventually ordering meals together, splitting the cost in a way that felt equal rather than transactional. Daniel introduced Emma to Victoria at the library one Saturday afternoon. He'd been nervous about it, worried that Emma might be shy, or that Victoria might not know how to interact with a 6-year-old. Those worries evaporated within minutes. Emma had been sitting in the children's section, surrounded by picture books, when Daniel and Victoria walked in. She looked up, her eyes widening. "Is that your friend, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. This is Victoria." Emma stood up, suddenly shy, her hands twisting the hem of her shirt. She studied Victoria with the serious intensity only children can muster. Then, she stepped forward and buried her face in Victoria's coat. "You smell like Mommy," Emma whispered. Daniel's heart stopped. Victoria froze, her hands hovering uncertainly before she gently placed them on Emma's small shoulders. "That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me," Victoria said softly. Emma pulled back, looking up with those big brown eyes. "Mommy always smelled like flowers. And you do too." "What's your favorite flower?" Victoria asked, crouching down to Emma's level. "Daisies. Because they're happy flowers. I like daisies too." And just like that, a bond formed. They spent the afternoon in the library, with Emma showing Victoria her favorite books and Victoria reading in funny voices that made Emma giggle until she had hiccups. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Victoria goodbye, and Daniel saw something in Victoria's eyes he hadn't seen before: longing. One evening, as Daniel was leaving work, his phone rang. Victoria's name lit up the screen. "Hey," he answered. "What's up?" "I have a favor to ask, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Okay." Sterling Organics is hosting a workshop on infant nutrition next Wednesday. We've got pediatricians, nutritionists, policymakers, the works. And I want you there. Victoria, I'm not a nutritionist. I wouldn't even know what half those words mean. Exactly. That's why I need you. Her voice was earnest. These people are brilliant, but they don't live in the real world. They don't understand what it's like to stand in a grocery store with $20 and try to figure out how to feed your kid healthy food for a week. You do. I don't know. Please, Daniel. I'm not asking you to present or speak. Just attend. Listen. And if you have thoughts, share them. That's all. He closed his eyes, leaning against his car. Why do you keep doing this? Doing what? Believing in me. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle. Because someone has to. And if you won't do it for yourself yet, let me do it until you can. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. This story is about the power of being seen, of having someone believe in you when you've stopped believing in yourself. Has someone ever done that for you? Or have you been that person for someone else? Drop a comment and share your story. And if you believe everyone deserves a Victoria in their life, hit that like button. Your support keeps this channel alive. The workshop was held in a sleek conference room at Sterling Organics headquarters. Daniel felt completely out of place in his button-down shirt among people in tailored suits holding leather portfolios. But Victoria met him at the entrance with a warm smile and walked him in like he belonged there. The presentations were dense talk of micronutrients, preservative regulations, allergen labeling standards. Daniel took notes not because he understood everything, but because it gave his hands something to do. Then, during the Q&A session, something happened. A pediatrician was discussing the importance of fresh ingredients, emphasizing that parents should prioritize whole foods over processed options. Daniel's hand went up before he could stop himself. The room turned to look at him. Yes? the pediatrician said. You have a question? More of a comment, I guess. Daniel's voice was shaky, but he pushed through. Everything you're saying makes sense in theory. But what about single parents who work 2 jobs? What about families where the nearest grocery store with fresh produce is an hour away? What about people who literally have to choose between buying organic vegetables or keeping the heat on? The room went quiet. I'm not trying to be difficult, Daniel continued. I'm just saying, when you're standing in the frozen food aisle with $12 left until payday, fresh and organic isn't always an option. What should we be looking for on those frozen dinner labels? What's the least bad choice? The pediatrician looked uncomfortable. Well, ideally, but not everyone lives in ideally, Daniel interrupted gently. Some of us live in reality. A murmur ran through the room. Several people nodded. Victoria, sitting at the front table, was smiling. The pediatrician cleared his throat. You make an excellent point. Perhaps we need to refocus our messaging on accessible guidance rather than ideal scenarios. After the session, several attendees approached Daniel, asking him to elaborate. One nutritionist even took his email, saying she wanted to consult with him on a project about food insecurity. As the room emptied, Victoria walked over, her eyes bright with something Daniel couldn't quite name. See, she said simply. Impossible is just a word. That evening, Victoria asked Daniel to meet her at a small cafe near the workshop venue. When he arrived, she had 2 cups of coffee waiting and a folder on the table. What's this? He asked, sliding into the booth. Scholarship applications. Victoria pushed the folder toward him. I did some research. There are 4 programs specifically for single parents pursuing healthcare certifications. The deadlines are all in the next 2 months. Daniel's throat tightened. Victoria, I know what you're going to say. You don't have time. You don't have help. You don't think you're qualified. She held up a hand. But here's what I know. You're smart, you're dedicated, and you deserve this opportunity. So I'm going to help you with the applications. And before you get all proud and stubborn on me, this isn't charity. It's an investment in someone I believe in. He stared at the folder, emotions warring inside him. Pride, fear, hope, gratitude. Why are you doing all this? He asked quietly. Victoria met his eyes. Because someone did it for me once. A professor at business school saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. She stayed late to help me with applications. She wrote recommendation letters. She believed I belonged in rooms where I felt like an imposter. She paused. I'm just paying it forward. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we're knee-deep in essay prompts and recommendation letters. He laughed, but his eyes were misty. I mean it. Thank you for seeing me. Victoria squeezed his hand. You made it easy. As fall turned to winter, Daniel, Victoria, and Emma fell into a rhythm that none of them had expected, but all of them needed. Victoria started stopping by Daniel's apartment when her meetings ran late and Emma's after-school program had already closed. She'd bring takeout Never Fancy, always Emma's favorites, and they'd eat together on the worn couch while Emma chattered about her day. Daniel would find himself consulting with Victoria on product launches, giving her honest feedback about whether actual parents would understand her marketing materials. And Emma started drawing pictures of her family that included 3 stick figures instead of 2. One Thursday evening, after their usual coffee, Victoria invited Daniel and Emma to her penthouse for dinner. Daniel had been nervous about seeing how the other half lived, worried it would highlight the gap between their worlds. But Victoria's home, while beautiful, felt empty. Elegant and spotless, but missing the warmth of lived-in spaces. Emma noticed immediately. "You don't have any pictures," she said, her little voice echoing in the open living room. "I don't really have many pictures to put up," Victoria admitted. "Everyone has pictures. Daddy has pictures of Mommy everywhere." Victoria smiled sadly. "I don't have a family to take pictures of, sweetheart." Emma considered this very seriously. Then she grabbed Victoria's hand and Daniel's hand, pulling them together. "Take a picture of us. Then you'll have one." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Daniel. He nodded, his own throat tight. They took a selfie on Victoria's phone. Daniel, Victoria, and Emma squished together on Victoria's pristine white couch, all of them smiling. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep on Victoria's guest room bed and Daniel had carried her to the car, Victoria walked him to the door. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "We didn't do anything special." "That's exactly what made it special." She hesitated, then added, "I haven't felt this, connected to anyone, in a long time." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the CEO, past the success, past the designer clothes. He saw a woman who was just as lonely as he had been, who had everything the world said mattered and nothing she actually needed. "Neither have I," he said honestly. They stood there in the doorway, the air between them charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. "Good night, Victoria. Good night, Daniel." As he drove home, Emma stirred in the back seat. "Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily. "Yeah, baby?" "I love Victoria." Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt since Sarah died. "Yeah, sweetheart. Me too." It started in small ways. Victoria's morning texts changed from professional updates to personal check-ins. How did Emma's math test go? Did you fix the heater? Thinking about you today. Daniel found himself stopping by her office with coffee, not because she asked, but because he knew she forgot to eat when she was deep in work mode. Emma started asking, "Is Victoria coming over tonight?" with the same expectation she had for bedtime stories. The three of them were becoming something none of them had planned, but all of them needed. One December evening, Emma came down with a fever. Daniel had just gotten home from his shift, exhausted and covered in warehouse dust, when he found his daughter curled on the couch, flushed and whimpering. "Hey, baby girl," he said, pressing his hand to her forehead. She was burning up. "When did you start feeling bad?" "After school," Emma whispered. "Mrs. Patterson said I felt warm, but I didn't want to bother you." Guilt stabbed through him. His daughter had been suffering for hours, trying not to be a burden. He carried her to her bedroom, tucked her in with her favorite stuffed rabbit, and went to the kitchen to get children's Tylenol and a cool washcloth. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, how's your evening?" Without thinking, he called her instead of texting. "Hey," she answered warmly. "I wasn't expecting." "Emma's sick." The words came out more desperate than he'd intended. "She's got a fever, and I think she might be getting the flu that's going around her school, and I don't know if I should take her to urgent care, or if I'm overreacting. And, Daniel, breathe." Victoria's voice was calm, grounding. "Have you taken her temperature?" "C. Okay. That's high, but not emergency level." "Have you given her medicine?" "Just about to." "Good. Do that. Keep her hydrated. And I'm coming over." "You don't have to. I'm already grabbing my keys." Victoria arrived 20 minutes later with a pharmacy bag full of supplies. More children's medicine, electrolyte popsicles, a new thermometer, and a stuffed bear wearing a tiny doctor's coat. "For the patient," she said, holding up the bear. Daniel let her in, feeling simultaneously grateful and embarrassed by the state of his apartment, the dishes in the sink, the laundry basket in the corner, the general chaos of single-parent survival. Victoria didn't seem to notice any of it. She went straight to Emma's room. Emma's eyes lit up, despite her misery. "Victoria." "Hey, sunshine." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, brushing Emma's damp hair from her forehead. "Your dad tells me you're not feeling so good. My throat hurts, and I'm cold, but also hot." "I know, sweetie. That's the worst, isn't it?" Victoria pulled a small cloth from her bag, the kind used for aromatherapy, and dampened it with cool water and a few drops of lavender oil. "This might help. My mom used to do this for me when I was sick." She placed it gently on Emma's forehead, and the little girl sighed in relief. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "You're welcome, baby girl." Then Victoria did something that made Daniel's heart stop. She started humming. At first, it was barely audible, a soft melody drifting through the small room, but Daniel recognized it immediately. It was the lullaby Sarah used to sing. His wife had made up silly words to an old folk tune, turning it into a story about a little girl who befriended the moon. She'd sung it every night until Emma was 3, and then she'd gotten sick, and then she was gone. Daniel hadn't heard that melody in 3 years. His knees went weak, and he had to grip the doorframe to keep from collapsing. Tears streamed down his face before he could stop them. Victoria's voice wavered when she noticed, but she kept singing, not because she knew the significance she couldn't have known, but because Emma's eyes were fluttering closed, her breathing evening out as sleep finally claimed her. When the song ended, Victoria carefully stood and followed Daniel into the living room. He was sitting on the couch, his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "What did I do? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "It was Sarah's song," he choked out. "My wife. She made it up for Emma. I haven't heard it since she died, and I don't know how you knew it, but—" "I didn't know." Victoria sat beside him, her own eyes filling. It was something my grandmother taught me. I didn't realize." "It's not your fault." He looked up at her, his face wet. "It's just hearing it again. It brought everything back. How much I miss her. How hard this has been. How scared I am that I'm failing Emma." Victoria reached for his hand. "You're not failing her, Daniel. You're showing up every single day. You're loving her. You're doing your best. That's not failure, that's heroism. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like barely surviving. Sometimes they're the same thing." They sat together in the quiet apartment, the only sound Emma's soft breathing from the next room and the hum of the old heater struggling to warm the space. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said after a long moment. "Yeah, I've been alone most of my adult life. By choice, mostly. I told myself I didn't have time for relationships, that my company was enough." She paused. "But being here with you and Emma, it's the first time I've felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something bigger than quarterly earnings and board meetings." Daniel looked at her. "You've given us so much. You've given me something too. You've given me a reason to leave the office before midnight, a reason to laugh, A reason to believe that success isn't just about what you build, it's about who you build it with. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Something that had been building since that first night at the restaurant, when a stranger had seen a broken man and chosen kindness over indifference. "I don't know what this is," Daniel said softly. "This thing between us." "Neither do I." Victoria squeezed his hand. "But I know I don't want it to stop." "Emma loves you." "I love her too. Victoria's voice cracked. "She's the closest thing I'll ever have to a daughter." "Why do you say it like that? Like it's already over?" Victoria looked away. "Because I'm 40 years old, Daniel. I spent my 20s and 30s building an empire instead of a family. I made my choices. So make new ones." She met his eyes again, surprise flickering across her face. "You don't have to have given birth to be a mother," Daniel said. "Sarah taught me that. She had a friend who fostered kids, and Sarah used to say that love makes family, not biology." He paused. "Emma has already chosen you. The question is, will you choose her back?" Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "I already have." From that night forward, something changed in how they moved through the world together. Victoria stopped calling their Thursday dinners networking and started calling them what they were: family time. Daniel stopped feeling guilty for accepting her help and started seeing it as what it was: partnership. And Emma started calling Victoria Mama V. It happened casually one morning when Victoria had stayed over after Emma's fever finally broke. They were all eating breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast, made in Daniel's tiny kitchen, and Emma looked up from her plate. "Mama V, can you pass the juice?" The room went still. Emma didn't seem to realize what she'd said. But Daniel and Victoria locked eyes across the table, both of them holding their breath. "Of course, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion as she handed over the juice. Later, after Emma had gone to play in her room, Daniel found Victoria standing by the kitchen window, wiping her eyes. "I didn't tell her to call you that," he said softly. "I know. Does it bother you?" Victoria turned to him, her face glowing through her tears. "It's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Take a moment and think about the people who have become family, even if they're not blood. The ones who showed up, the ones who stayed, the ones who chose you. Drop a comment and tag them. Let them know they matter. And if this story is touching your heart, please share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this message today. The letter arrived in late January, on a day when Boston was buried under 2 feet of snow and the city seemed to exist in shades of white and gray. Daniel had just gotten home from his shift, exhausted and cold, when he saw the thick envelope wedged in his mailbox. His hands shook as he opened it, not daring to hope. "Dear Mr. Carter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship to the Pacific Northwest Medical Technician Certification Program." The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. He'd done it. After months of applications, essays, recommendation letters, after Victoria had stayed up late helping him polish his personal statement, after he'd doubted himself 1,000 times he'd actually done it. A full scholarship, a year-long intensive program in Portland, Oregon, full certification, with job placement assistance at the end. It was everything he dreamed of, everything that had seemed impossible just months ago. And it was 3,000 miles away. He couldn't bring himself to tell Victoria right away. For 3 days, he carried the letter in his pocket, its edges softening from constant touching. Every time he looked at her laughing with Emma, consulting with him on a product launch, simply sitting beside him at their Thursday dinner, the words stuck in his throat. Finally, on Saturday afternoon at the park, While Emma chased bubbles across the brown winter grass, he told her, "I got the scholarship," he said, his voice flat despite the magnitude of the news. Victoria's face lit up. "Daniel, that's incredible." She threw her arms around him, her joy genuine and unguarded. But when she pulled back and saw his expression, her smile faded. "Why do you look like someone died?" "It's in Oregon." The words came out heavy. "Portland. A year-long program. I'd have to leave in March." Understanding dawned slowly across Victoria's face. "Oh, I'm sorry," Daniel said quickly. "I know we've built something here, and I don't want you to think I'm just walking away now that things are good. I don't want you to think I used you to get to this point." "Daniel, stop." Victoria grabbed his shoulders. "Look at me." He did, seeing his own fear reflected in her eyes. "This is amazing," she said firmly. "This is the opportunity you've been working toward. This is your future." "But what about Emma?" "What about?" He trailed off, unable to say "what about us" out loud. Victoria's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "Loving someone doesn't mean holding them. It means not clipping their wings." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. "I can't ask you to wait for me," he said. "You're not asking. I'm choosing." She cupped his face in her hands. "Daniel, I've spent my entire adult life building a company. I sacrificed relationships, family, everything for success. And you know what I learned? Success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with." "Then come with me," he said desperately. "You can run your company from anywhere. Come to Portland with us." Victoria smiled sadly. "I can't. I have a board meeting that will determine our next funding round. I have product launches scheduled. I have 300 employees depending on me." She paused. "But that doesn't mean this is over. It means we're strong enough to bend without breaking." "What if we do break?" "Then we weren't as strong as I believe we are." She pressed her forehead to his. "But I don't think that's going to happen. Do you know why?" She wanted the stories. He pressed her, writing, "We wanted the stories problem. Has been a well, wanted the stories problem." And he presented Haver. "We wanted the stories problem." And he wanted the stories problem. Why? Because we chose each other before we needed each other. This isn't about security or convenience. This is about two people who saw each other when the world said we were invisible. That doesn't just disappear because of distance. The next few weeks were a blur of preparations and complicated emotions. Daniel gave notice at his job, started packing the apartment, enrolled Emma in a new school in Portland. Every item he placed in a box felt like dismantling the life they'd built together. Victoria helped with everything. She researched neighborhoods in Portland, helped Daniel find an affordable apartment near campus, even bought Emma a new winter coat for the Oregon rain. But at night, when Emma was asleep and they sat together on Daniel's couch amid half-packed boxes, the weight of what was coming pressed down on both of them. "I'm scared," Daniel admitted one evening. "Of what?" "Of losing this. Of losing you." Victoria took his hand. "You're not losing me. I'm not going anywhere." "How do you know?" "What if you meet someone while I'm gone? What if a year is too long, and you realize you're better off without the complication of a guy with a kid who lives across the country?" "Daniel." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "You know what I learned?" "What?" "Uncomplicated is boring, and it's lonely in a different way." She squeezed his hand. "You and Emma aren't complications. You're the reason I finally understand what I've been working for all these years. On Daniel's last night in Boston, Victoria came over with Emma's favorite pizza and a small gift bag. They ate together on the floor, surrounded by boxes, with paper plates on their laps like a makeshift picnic. Emma was unusually quiet, her eyes red from crying earlier when the reality of leaving had finally hit her. "Mama V," she said softly, "are you going to forget about us?" Victoria set down her pizza and pulled Emma into her lap. "Not possible, sunshine." "Do you know why?" Emma shook her head. "Because you're in here now." Victoria tapped Emma's chest over her heart. "And once someone is in your heart, they stay there forever. Distance doesn't change that." "But what if forever is too long and you get lonely?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'll look at the pictures we took together. I'll remember the jokes that made us laugh. I'll think about the way you draw pictures with 3 stick figures instead of 2, and I'll know that even though we're apart, we're still family. Promise?" Emma's voice was so small, so hopeful. "I promise." Victoria kissed the top of Emma's head. "And you know what else?" "What?" "We're going to make a paper chain. 1 link for every week until your daddy finishes his program, and every week that passes, we'll tear off a link together. That way, we can see the time getting shorter." Emma perked up. "Can we make it now?" "Absolutely." They spent the next hour cutting strips of colored paper and looping them together. Emma insisted on using every color, creating a rainbow chain that stretched across the entire living room. 52 weeks, Victoria said as they hung the last link. "And then, this adventure ends, and a new one begins." When it was time for Victoria to leave, Daniel walked her to the door. Emma had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying and chain-making. "Thank you," Daniel said, "for everything. For seeing me that night, for believing in me, for loving Emma, for," his voice cracked, "for making me believe I deserved good things." Victoria reached into the gift bag she'd brought and pulled out a small wrapped box. "Don't open this until you're on the plane," she said. "What is it?" "A reminder." She smiled through her tears. "And a promise." They stood in the doorway, neither wanting to be the first to let go. "I love you," Victoria said. Simple. True. No fanfare. Daniel's breath caught. "I love you too." "Then that's all we need to get through this." She kissed him a kiss that tasted like salt and promises and the ache of goodbye. When she pulled away, she pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "I'll be right here," she whispered. "No matter how far you go. Steinstein. 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 End close. You can Stimes. End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. The next morning, Daniel and Emma boarded a plane to Portland. As promised, Daniel waited until they were in the air to open Victoria's gift. Inside the box was a silver compass on a chain and a note in her elegant handwriting. "No matter where this journey takes you, you'll always know your way back home, because home isn't a place, it's wherever we choose to build it. Together, V." Daniel fastened the compass around his neck, and Emma leaned against his shoulder. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby." "Mama V said hearts don't care about distance. Is that true?" Daniel looked out the window at the clouds below, feeling the weight of the compass against his chest. "Yeah, Em. I think it is." BM. 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 1 year later, Daniel Carter stepped through the staff entrance of Boston General Hospital, his ID badge clipped to his Navy scrubs. Daniel Carter, certified medical technician. The words still felt surreal. The year in Oregon had been the hardest of his life. Between intensive classes, clinical rotations, and single parenting in a new city, he'd survived on 4 hours of sleep and lived on instant ramen most weeks. But he'd done it. Every week, he and Emma had torn off a link from the paper chain Victoria had made. Every week, he'd video called Victoria, sharing his small victories and frustrations. Every week, the distance had felt both infinite and manageable because of one simple truth. They'd chosen each other. Now he was back in Boston with a certification, a job offer at the hospital, and a new apartment in a better neighborhood. And today, Victoria had invited him to something special. The rooftop garden at Sterling Organics headquarters had been transformed. String lights crisscrossed overhead, reflecting off rows of chairs filled with employees, investors, and press. Tables overflowed with samples of a new product line, each package displaying elegant design and careful attention to detail. Daniel stood at the back, Emma's hand in his, both of them dressed in their nicest clothes. The banner across the stage read, "Her first spoon, organic nutrition for real families." And then Victoria took the podium. She looked stunning in a navy dress, her hair swept up, her posture confident. But when her eyes found Daniel in the crowd, her whole face softened with a smile that was just for him. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "Thank you for being here to celebrate the launch of our most important product line yet." She spoke about nutrition, about accessibility, about the research that had gone into developing organic baby food that was both affordable and truly nourishing. But then she said something that made Daniel's throat tighten. "This line exists because of a conversation I had with someone who taught me that good intentions mean nothing if they don't translate to real solutions for real people. Someone who reminded me that the goal isn't perfection, it's dignity. It's making sure that every parent, regardless of their zip code or their paycheck, can feel confident about what they're feeding their child." She looked directly at Daniel. "This line is dedicated to single parents who show up every day, who stretch every dollar, who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and somehow still manage to show their kids that love is more important than having everything perfect." Her voice wavered slightly. "The tagline for this line is, 'For the parents who stayed hungry to feed hope,' because that's what you do every single day." The room erupted in applause. But Victoria wasn't done. She gestured to her assistant, who brought out a framed image. On it was a silhouette, a woman holding a child, a spoon raised in the other hand, and beneath it, in small print, "In honor of every parent who turns emptiness into enough." Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he held Emma close. After the presentation, after the press photos and the congratulations, Victoria found Daniel waiting by the elevators. "You did it," he said. "It's incredible." "We did it," she corrected. "None of this happens without you." They stood there, two people who had traveled 3,000 miles only to find their way back to each other. "I have something for you too," Victoria said quietly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Daniel's breath caught. She opened it, revealing a simple silver band with a small engraving on the inside. Not a rescue, a choice. "Victoria, I'm not getting down on one knee," she said quickly. "This isn't about grand gestures or fairy tale proposals. This is about two people who chose each other when the world said we didn't make sense, who built something real out of nothing but faith in showing up." She took his hand. "I don't want to save you, Daniel. I never did. I just want to stay, if you'll let me. Daniel pulled her close, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Yes, he whispered. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Emma tugged on Victoria's dress. Does this mean you're going to be my real mama now? Victoria crouched down, eye to eye with the little girl who had stolen her heart. Sweetheart, I was your real mama the moment you called me Mama V. This just makes it official. Emma threw her arms around both of them, and the three of them stood there in the hallway of Sterling Organics, holding each other like they'd never let go. That evening, they returned to where it all began. Marcello's, the same restaurant, the same table by the window, but this time, everything was different. Daniel sat beside Victoria, Emma across from them, all three of them laughing as they pored over the menu together. The waitress Marcus approached with a knowing smile. Miss Sterling, Mr. Carter, and young Miss Emma, it's wonderful to see you all together. The usual? Victoria asked Daniel. Actually, Daniel said, reaching for Emma's hand and Victoria's hand. Let's try something new. All of us, together. They ordered dishes to share, passing plates family style, Emma stealing bites from both of their entrees and declaring it the best dinner ever. At one point, Emma pulled out a folded piece of paper from her backpack. I made this at school, she said proudly, unfolding it. It was a drawing in crayon 3 stick figures at a dinner table, holding hands. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, My family. The misspelling only made it more perfect. Daniel and Victoria looked at each other across the table, both of them thinking about the night 1.5 years ago when a broken man had sat at this same table with nothing but $50 and fading hope. I can't believe we're here, Daniel said softly. Where else would we be? Victoria replied. Emma looked up from her drawing. Are you guys going to cry again? They laughed, wiping their eyes. These are happy tears, baby, Daniel said. Then I'm glad, Emma decided, because this is the happiest dinner ever. And she was right. As they left the restaurant, Daniel paused at the door and looked back at the table by the window. He thought about the man who had sat there alone, believing he wasn't worth showing up for, believing he didn't deserve a seat at any table that mattered. Now he understood the truth. Worthiness isn't something you earn through perfection. It's something you claim when you're brave enough to show up, even when everything says you shouldn't. He had shown up that night with $50 and a fragile hope, and he was leaving with a family, a future, and the unshakable knowledge that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Victoria took his hand. Emma grabbed the other, and together no longer 3 separate people, but one family built on choice and courage and love, they walked out into the Boston night. Home. If this story touched your heart, I want you to know, you matter. Your struggles matter. Your decision to show up, even when it feels impossible, matters. Maybe you're sitting alone right now, wondering if anyone sees you, wondering if you deserve the good things you're too afraid to ask for. I'm here to tell you, you do. You deserve to be seen. You deserve kindness. You deserve a seat at the table. So here's what I want you to do. First, subscribe to this channel if you believe in stories about second chances and real hope. Your subscription tells me these stories matter. Second, hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible and need the reminder that you're not. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You know who they are. Tag them. Send it to them. Be there, Victoria. And finally, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, what city, what country, what small corner of the world, and rate this story from 1 to 10. I read every single comment, and your words fuel this channel. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe you deserve to show up. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep showing up, keep believing, keep building your family however that looks.